It might be hard to believe, but Donald Trump's 2020 campaign strategy of tear gassing Americans, ignoring a pandemic, and banning TikTok isn't performing as well as you might think. As a result, Democrats have a chance at not only winning the White House in November, but now the Senate too. If they do, their next best move is going to take a lot of guts. They've got to nuke the Senate filibuster. If we're going to talk about getting rid of the filibuster, we first have to talk about what it is and how we ended up with it. Because I think a lot of Americans would be surprised to learn just how silly this thing is. Not only is the filibuster not in the Constitution, but it's pretty counterintuitive to what most of the framers wanted. In fact, its entire creation was kind of an accident. After the Constitution created the House of Representatives and the Senate, the original representatives and senators had to get together and actually write the rules for how both chambers would operate. One of them was the previous question motion, which was essentially a formal way that senators could end debate by a simple majority vote. Back then, it was the norm for senators to make their case for or against a bill and then vote. The previous question motion almost never got used. In 1806, then Vice President Aaron Burr recommended that the Senate revise their rule and get rid of the ones that were redundant or superfluous, including the previous question motion, and they took that advice. Little did they know at the time that they were opening up the option for senators to refuse a vote on a bill by just never ending debate. Filibusters still wouldn't become common for decades. And it wasn't until World War I that then President Woodrow Wilson demanded that the Senate create a cloture rule, which it did. It required 2/3 of the senators in attendance to vote to end debate. These numbers would adjust slightly over time, usually based on however many votes were needed to block civil rights legislation. But then in the 70s, they invented the two-track system. This made it so filibusters couldn't halt Senate business altogether. If a bill was being filibustered, they could move it to its own track and still move on with the rest of the business they needed to do. And then in 1975, you didn't even really need to be in person for the filibuster. You wouldn't need to physically get up and talk to filibuster. You could just sort of threaten a filibuster to block a bill. In 2013, Senate Democrats eliminated the filibuster for all non-Supreme Court presidential nominees after the Senate Republicans pretty much embargoed all nominations by President Barack Obama. Then in 2017, Senate Republicans eliminated the filibuster for Supreme Court nominations as well, leaving us where we are today, where you need 60 votes in the Senate to pass anything other than presidential nominations and budget reconciliation. So those are essentially the only things that get done in the Senate. So the only major questions left to answer is, can we get rid of the filibuster and should we? The answer to the first question is a pretty straightforward yes. The Senate doesn't need to pass a law to change the rules. A senator just needs to make a motion to not follow a rule anymore, and then there's an immediate vote without debate, and you only need a simple majority to win. In fact, this is how we got rid of the filibusters in 2013 and 2017. It's commonly and kind of dramatically referred to as the nuclear option. Unfortunately, depending on who you talk to, the question of whether or not we should eliminate the filibuster is very complicated. Spoiler alert, I'm not one of those people. I think it's very simple. I think the legislature should be able to legislate, and the minority should not have dominion over the majority. The minority is usually the minority for a reason. The common argument in favor of the filibuster is that the framers wanted the Senate to be extra deliberative, almost inferring that the filibuster is something that the framers would have liked or wanted. But as we discussed earlier, they didn't put it in the Constitution, and they spent a good amount of time talking about what they thought the minority's role in passing legislation should be. In fact, this is what Alexander Hamilton had to say about supermajorities. To give a minority a negative upon the majority, which is always the case where more than a majority is requisite to a decision, is in its tendency to subject the sense of the greater number to that of the lesser. The necessity of unanimity in public bodies, or of something approaching towards it, has been founded upon a supposition that it would contribute to security. But its real operation is to embarrass the administration, to destroy the energy of the government, and to substitute the pleasure, caprice, or artifices of an insignificant, turbulent, or corrupt junto to the regular deliberations and decisions of a respectable majority. A junto, I've come to learn, is a political grouping or faction. And it makes me wonder if we've had to deal with any corrupt or turbulent gentos in our day. Either way, the point is that the framers thought a lot about giving the minority too much power. They thought it was a bad idea, and their fears have come true today. The other common argument that I simply just don't understand, this comes up a lot in electoral college debates too, is that it's somehow ethically or morally wrong for the majority opinion to be able to outweigh minority opinions. And if you eliminate the filibuster, you're going to be silencing minority views. First of all, the Senate by its nature completely distorts voter representation by requiring that each state gets 2 senators regardless of that state's population. So I don't know how anybody's ever supposed to really calculate whether or not minority or majority views and opinions are over or underrepresented in that body. We're not talking about the opinions and views of the American people. We're talking about the opinions and views of those 100 senators. The Senate's never been about representing the views and opinions of the American people. It's about deliberation and debate. But senators don't have to do either of those 2 things so long as the filibuster exists. If a senator wants to block a law that would create universal health care, they don't need to get in front of the Senate and debate the merits of that law. They can just get up and read Green Eggs and Ham if they want. They don't even have to do that. They can just threaten a filibuster and block the bill. So it's not about deliberating or debating good and bad bills. It's about passing or blocking the bills they think they need to pass and block in order to get reelected. But while we're on the topic of minorities and representation, I want to take a second to talk about why I made this video in the first place. On July 17th, civil rights icon, American hero, and Congressman John Lewis passed away. At his eulogy, President Barack Obama brought up the filibuster. He said, "If it takes eliminating the filibuster, another Jim Crow relic, in order to secure the God-given rights of every American, then that's what we should do." Well, that is what it takes, and it is what we should do. The first anti-lynching bill was brought to the floor of the Senate in 1920, and it was blocked by a filibuster. It wasn't until 2005 that such a piece of legislation was passed, and in the meantime, literally thousands of Black Americans were lynched. Whether it was legal segregation or other Jim Crow era laws, we had the votes to defeat them long before they actually did, and it was all because of the filibuster. It's not an overstatement at all to say that the spirit of the Confederacy has been kept alive in large part because of the filibuster. What's the point of elections if the people that we elect can't do their jobs? And that's what the filibuster represents. It represents decades more of Senate inaction unless we eliminate it now. It perpetuates the notion that our government is ineffective, and it discourages voting. Worst of all, it discourages cooperation among the people that we vote for. Nuke it. Sure, it means that we're going to have pretty big fights with Senate majorities that we don't necessarily agree with in the future. But John Lewis wouldn't be afraid of that fight, and we shouldn't be either. Thanks again for coming by for another video. Oh, this one was a beast, but I really enjoyed putting it together. I love having these conversations. There's so much happening in the country right now. I can't wait to go over all of it with you. We're going to be talking about testing and how we're screwing it up. We're going to be talking about all the ways that Donald Trump is exposing fatal flaws in our Constitution. I can't wait to get to it. Thanks again. Have a great week. We'll talk to you next Sunday.